y oía esa música horrible. Y yo dije, Dios mío, ¿qué me pasó? ¿Dónde está mi hijo? Si alguna persona me hubiera dicho, no te preocupes, un día Luis va a ser un abogado y él va a estar bien, yo le hubiera dicho, no.
I started law school before Daca, and undocumented students can't get financial aid. And that was a big issue because law school is expensive. And then I realized that it was cheaper to pay out-of-state tuition than to pay in-state tuition in California. I ended up going to the University of Idaho. And I had resigned myself in the first year that I was not going to be able to practice law. And because I knew I didn't have the authority to work and I didn't have a social security number, so I just figured I was going to go back and do what my parents did, which is work blue-collar jobs, respectable blue-collar jobs, but not practice law. So I called my mom and I said, I'm packing up my stuff and I'm leaving because I'm not going to get to practice law. So why do this at all?
Le dije, oh, no. Ya empezó, ahora termina. Si no puede practicar, no importa, pero empezó algo, termínalo.
She hella yelled at me, and she said that I wasn't allowed to come back, that even if I didn't get to practice law later, whatever I learned in law school, they couldn't unteach me, and that we don't get to these spaces often. And I remember crying in my car in the snow, like being like, okay, I guess I'll just stick around. And so then when I was going into my last year and DACA was announced and I told her, one of the first things she said was, this is going to allow you to practice law. And I said, yeah, I think so. The next thing she said was like, I told you so. Hi, can you see me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. So the reason that I'm calling is because we finally heard back from the Ninth Circuit today, and they have granted you the deferral, and now we're just going to be working on you getting released. The case is all over.
So I get to go home?
You'll be getting out.
No, is you serious?
I'm serious. The case is done. The time that I'm feeling very much undocumented, it's not when we lose, it's when we win. You can get you out right away. One of us is walking out with legal status, and it's not the lawyer. You're going to go home. The case is over.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And I'm like, I'm so happy for you that you got your green card. But I'm also a tiny bit salty. I'm envious, and I want to celebrate that too.
They don't have socials. It makes no sense.
It is hard. I don't think I feel it every day. It's after a little while that it starts compounding, and then I start feeling the real weight of it. And I think part of that too is that, when you're there and you're with your clients, you're there to be their North Star. And there's not a whole lot of room for your feelings. And so I've gotten pretty good about putting those away.
I will immediately terminate President Obama's illegal executive order on immigration. Immediately.
We knew that President Trump was using DACA as a stalking horse for immigration policies. He was attempting to use DACA recipients as pawns, as sacrificial lambs, to get those policies through.
There are some DACA recipients who already have a deportation order, and DACA is the only thing stopping ICE from deporting them. They're going to lose their homes. They're going to lose their ability to feed their kids.
Even though Ramirez had DACA documentation, an ICE agent told him it doesn't matter because you weren't born in this country.
Free Daniel! Free Daniel! Free Daniel!
The lawyers are now suing Homeland Security.
Daniel's case was particularly important because it was the first, and if the government got away with that prosecution, it would open the door to tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands.
I figured that this was going to be the end of DACA by 1,000 cuts, where it slowly but surely they will start detaining DACA individuals and then not care about their DACA status.
Me dijeron que yo era de un pandillero, que por el tatuaje. Les dije que no era pandillero. Les dije, no soy pandillero, no soy nada. Y ellos me dijeron, no, sí eres. Vamos para allá y así.
They did not have a warrant for my brother. They're not supposed to take him. He is from here.
Solo que es muy fuerte esto, pues. Sí. No sé por qué hacen eso. Si yo estoy en México no lo voy a poder ver. Yo pienso que no lo voy a poder. Mi hijo, Daniel Jr., ya va en primer grado. Él sabe que yo hablo con el abogado y todo. Pero así no le he explicado bien cómo está todo. Pero pues él, es que no le quiero decir que nos pueden separar porque pues él, yo pienso que no le está chiquito todavía pues para separar. Yo nomás quiero que esto se resuelva ya.
I got a phone call from Daniel's brother, who was very panicked on a Friday afternoon saying, they took my brother, he has DACA. I immediately knew that something was wrong. That if he had DACA and he had done nothing wrong, they should not be detaining him. And I have DACA, and I was imagining how I would feel if they all of a sudden said, that doesn't matter, you're coming with me. Later that night, I put it out on a few listservs, some like immigration law Facebook groups about like, is this the new normal?
A colleague of mine called me and said, do you know that the government is prosecuting DACA recipients? And I was astonished.
And what happened was the government said, because you have a tattoo and because you're Mexican, you must be a gang member. Very early on, they knew that was not true, but they kept saying it anyway. They said it over and over again, and
Daniel would make the worst gang member. Yes, he's the sweetest person. Yeah, I would hate to have him in my gang. So, this matters a lot to me because they're saying that it's a tattoo problem. We know about the criminalizing of brown identities. He has DACA, and I'm brown, I have DACA, and I have tattoos. This could have very well been me. And I remember lifting up my arm and showing Ethan, and Ethan saw kind of the seriousness of it and said, yeah, we have to do something. This is Sunday night. We have to file first thing tomorrow morning. Like at 8 o'clock in the morning. I legit laughed because I thought they were kidding.
ICE, acting with the authorization of the executive branch, was determined to turn DACA into a non-entity. It was clear that we were going to need more firepower. I called an acquaintance of mine, worked with the Gibson Dunn law firm. They assembled some of their very best lawyers. I called law professors who had the scholarship, the research, and the clout. And we also talked to a top immigration lawyer in the Pacific Northwest. So we had the team that we felt could put together a case, prosecute that case, and hold the government accountable.
And so we were brainstorming, we figured out a plan, and next thing you know, we're working through the night to save Daniel. It just goes to show you that one case can really change your career. This has a history of targeting activists. My identity was really shaped by what I saw happening in my community. And what I started to internalize was that this was a problem in our community because of who we are.
Growing up undocumented, there was always a sense of like, well, maybe today's the day that I get picked up by ICE. Wrong place, wrong time.
You wouldn't tell anybody about your status. You tell the wrong person, you're giving them a lot of information that they can then use to retaliate. So you kept it quiet. An immigration lawyer and a law student getting ready to graduate. We're not only looking at plaintiffs who showed a tremendous amount of resilience, serious detriment that will come to the community, not just them, if their DACA is rescinded and they're ultimately deported.
This was a struggle that went beyond just those who were in DACA. This was a struggle in which every sector of the population had a stake. And so when 143 corporations said, you cannot do this to our society, they were saying economically that if DACA were to go away tomorrow, that it would cost the country billions and billions of dollars all the way into the future.
I asked, do you want to be part of this case? And they said, let me make sure that I'm understanding what you're asking of me. You're asking me to sue the most powerful government in the world, the US government, put myself out there and my life out there in order to advance immigrants' rights? I'm like, yeah, that's basically what I'm asking. No big deal.
Louise insisted that this case be presented in a moral way that would not permit the society, the American public, to divide DACA as the worthy immigrants and others as the unworthy immigrants.
One of the things that I remember, the conversation that we had in the very beginning was like, I don't know if we're going to win. We don't know if we're going to win. We might lose, and we might lose big. So I can't guarantee a win, but what I was going to guarantee is that they were going to hear our stories.
We weren't the only ones to try to act quickly. There were other cases that were filed in the state of California and across the country that also filed lawsuit on behalf of employees and our students. But our case was unique because we were the only ones that were made up of all DACA plaintiffs. Eventually, a judge in San Francisco consolidated all the cases that were brought in his court into one case called the UC Regents case.
Judge has blocked the Trump administration from rolling back DACA. The decision comes.
Outrageous is the word the White House used today to describe the injunction.
I was stoked. A San Francisco federal judge found that the Trump administration acted unlawfully. And not just in our case, other judges across the country who found that the Trump administration couldn't just end the program that hundreds of thousands of people have relied upon without actually giving a concrete reason why. But Trump was not taking no for an answer, so he appealed right away, and our next battle was at the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals.
The DACA program began with a promise that if we choose to recognize that you get DACA status, you will be able to renew that status so long as you play by the rules. The government never said that at the end of 2 years, we can take that welcome mat that we put out from you and use it as the rug that we're going to pull out from under you. The government never called.
And so the Ninth Circuit ultimately ruled in our favor, and Judge Wardlaw started the decision by saying, it is no hyperbole to say that Dulce Garcia embodies the American dream. I remember seeing the first line of the opinion, and it's hard not to get choked up on the first line. It was a short-lived victory. The Trump administration presumed that they had the votes and wanted to bypass normal protocols and get this case up at the Supreme Court as quickly as possible. What was even more unusual was that the Supreme Court went along with it, and they fast-tracked the case before the other appeal courts made their decision. This was a court that already expressed skepticism over the DACA program, so we were worried. One of the things that DACA did is that it really made this conversation part of the larger discourse, and I think it introduced people to the concept in many places that maybe weren't so immigrant-friendly, and it got them to move a little bit. So much so that we have one of the most conservative lawyers, Ted Olson, come and join our fight.
Ted has represented presidents, he's represented some of the most powerful corporations in the world. This will be his 65th argument in the Supreme Court.
I was very moved when I was asked whether I'd represent the DACA recipients in the Supreme Court. Every single one of them has a very touching, moving story. And I thought it was insane for this country not to give them an opportunity to work and support themselves, and I wanted to help.
This is where I do the work.
Preparing for this kind of a case was necessary to speak to them, to listen to them, to earn their trust. They have to believe in you. If they don't want you to be the person to do it, then you shouldn't be doing it.
Well, these are just... There was pushback from the immigrant rights community. They thought someone who was conservative couldn't tell stories correctly, or that there was a ulterior motive. I don't know. I thought it was going to be helpful. And, I think, the name of the game is to win. And we knew the composition of the court. We knew that there was more conservative justices than not. And I think sometimes what's just as important as the message is the messenger.
Ronald Reagan once said, you can go to Japan, but you can never become Japanese. Or you can go to Norway and never become Norwegian. But you can come to America and become an American. We've all come to this country in various different ways and from various different places.
I'll be honest, there are moments where sometimes that weight feels a bit heavier than other days. But I'm reminded of what brought about some of the most serious change in America. It's the direct action by people, not Congress, by people. I do feel inspired that even if the decision goes the other way, that we're in a moment where we're shifting America to the promise that it's supposed to be.
Yo no podía creerlo cuando me dijo, mamá, voy a ir a la Corte Suprema para lo de Daca. Sí, dijo, así es de que a ti que te encanta mucho orar, ponte a orar desde ahorita.
Tomorrow, the Supreme Court will hear arguments at 10 a.m. I've heard the tough arguments on this case and the points where this case can fall apart.
I'm very nervous.
There's a myth in this country that you only win in the Supreme Court based on brilliant Supreme Court advocacy by lawyers. That's not true. The greatest civil rights victories were won not by lawyers, but by the individuals whose stories those lawyers were privileged to tell. By the time this case got to court, everyone knew the story of Daca. And Luis was the one who really choreographed that. He was that story too.
We'll hear argument first this morning in case 18587. Mr. Olson?
Thank you, Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the court. The decision, Luis is the first DACA recipient ever to be a member of the Supreme Court bar. To have him sitting next to me in that court was a statement to me, and it was a statement to the justices, and it was a statement to everyone else that was watching or listening to that argument, that this is what this case is all about. The government's termination of DACA triggered abrupt, tangible, adverse consequences and substantial disruptions in the lives of 700,000 individuals, their families, employers, communities, and armed forces.
Do you agree that the executive has the legal authority to rescind DACA?
Yes.
The current president telling DACA eligible people that they were safe under him and that he would find a way to keep them here. And instead he's done this, and that I think has something to be considered before you rescind the policy.
Right.
Not just saying, I'll give you 6 months to do it.
Right.
To destroy your lives.
The stakes couldn't be higher for not just the 700,000 DACA recipients, but the communities. We're talking about millions of people, billions of dollars of impact in the economy. I'm hoping that Congress really hears the roars of the community. We have thousands of people here, and this is really what made DACA exist. The activism leads, and then the law follows.
This court should understand that this is a nation of immigrants, and that all of us should uphold the beliefs and the values of our country, and that is that immigrants are here to stay.
If we are successful, and I believe we will be, the court will say that decision was not justifiable, it was not consistent with the rule of law, you can't justify it that way, and it can't be sustained.
Now, it's pretty